everyone, my name is Nikki and welcome to the Constant Reader channel. Every 2 weeks we sit down and we talk about books, publishing, writing, and anything else that happens to come along. So get your TBR list ready, get something to drink, and let's get started. So it is that time of year again where it's fall. Leaves are falling, rain is coming, gray overcast days, which is the perfect time to read some scary books. You might be saying, but I don't like to read scary books. Or you might be one of those people that says, but I read really scary books. So what are you going to give me? I have a little bit of something for everyone today. 5 books that fall on the scary to not so scary spectrum, but we're actually going to start with the least scary and work our way forward. So let's get started. My first book is Coraline by Neil Gaiman. The title of this book should say it all. It's Coraline, not Caroline. And I think the author did that because I don't know. I don't know Mr. Gaiman, but if I did, I would totally be fangirling on him. It's not quite what it should be, much like Coraline's life. Now, Coraline lives a pretty mundane, regular life. Her family has moved to a new house. Parents, they're working, they bicker a little bit. They don't really have time for Coraline because there's just a lot going on. Coraline has given up her friends, which, you know, when your parents aren't that involved in your life, your friends are even that much more important. So she's just kind of stuck in this house. And they don't even have the whole house. They live in a house that's been chopped up into an apartment building. The neighbors are weird. Of course, there's no other little kids around. It's just Coraline and a bunch of old people. Her words, not mine. Until one day, Coraline finds a key. Or does the key find Coraline? That leads her to unlock a little door. And the little door takes her to the other house with the other mother and the other father and the other neighbors. Now, this other world is amazing. There's great food to eat. Her parents are interested in her. They want to know what's going on with her. Let's do fun things together. The neighbors, wow, still older, retired, they are so much fun. There's like a circus performer and he's got fleas that do things, and these 2 sisters that are former actors on the stage. They have great adventures. The only thing different between the regular world and this other world is everyone happens to have button eyes. As time goes on and Coraline keeps going between the other world and the regular world, being in the other world comes at a price. Price Coraline is not willing to pay. This book is creepy good. And when it first came out, I bought it because I used to be a school librarian and I worked at a middle school. And I used to tell kids, if Stephen King had written Alice in Wonderland, it would be this book. They loved it, and so will you. This next book is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Well, we read this book last year for book club. I run 2 book clubs because I am a public librarian now. And we chose this book because, ooh, it's spooky, and ooh, it's Shirley Jackson. So we were all excited to read The Haunting of Hill House. And I'm not going to lie, I watched the 1998 movie of the same name when it came out that has Liam Neeson and Catherine Zeta-Jones in it. And I loved it. So I don't care what you say. It was slightly scary, but not too scary. So I was really excited to read this book. It's not scary. It's atmospheric. It's full of dread. And the narrator, which is Eleanor, our main character, I don't know what to think about her. And I don't mean that in a bad way. She's just all over the place. And you think, is this an unreliable narrator? So I can't believe everything she says? I don't know. And we had a really fun discussion talking about Eleanor, because some people liked her, some people didn't. Some people were like me going, ugh. The Haunting of Hill House is one, I hate this word. It's not haunted house. That's not the word I hate. It's trope. I hate that word. And if I come up with another word, I'm totally going to use it. But it's a haunted place. So the house does weird, creepy things, but not creepy or scary enough to really... Bleh. You can tell that this really is a haunted story that sets the stage for other books that are haunted place books, because it introduces elements that other haunted house books use, but doesn't really flesh out those elements. It just kind of introduces them. So this book is not scary, very atmospheric, very moody, very dark and broody. It's not quite gothic, but it does kind of give you some gothic under vibes. So I recommend it. That way you can at least say, oh yes, I've read the book. The 1998 movie wasn't so bad. Our next book, and now we're at book 3, which is in the middle of our spectrum of scary to not so scary. And I chose this book as the third book. Number 1, it's by Neil Gaiman again, and I love him. And it's scary in parts, but then it's just very warm and loving in parts, which is a really weird place for this kind of book to be. It is The Ocean at the End of the Lane, like I said, Neil Gaiman. And this book is a book that I first listened to in audio because it's read by the author, and the author has a deep, gravelly voice, and it made the book that much more terrifying. And this is a book I also read every time around late September, early October, because it gets me in that Halloween-y, scary autumn vibe. Now, the narrator is a middle-aged man who is telling the story of what happened to him over a short time period when he was a 7-year-old. The 7-year-old is never named in the book, and neither is the middle-aged man. You have no idea who this person is. Because there's something really powerful in the name, we don't get a name. I think Neil Gaiman did that on purpose. Our 7-year-old little boy is living his best life. He is reading his books. He's got a mom and dad and a sister. Does he have friends? No, not really. But he's okay. He has his own adventures. He has his own candy stash. He has all of these nice little daily and weekend routines with his dad, and it's great. Until the family falls on some hard times and they've got to take in a boarder, somebody to rent this little guy's great room. And then he has to move in with his sister, which is not so good. This boarder is an opal miner from South Africa. I always want to say South America, South Africa. And the opal miner has a bit of a gambling problem, so bad that he takes his own life, which is terrible and devastating in itself. But where our story is concerned, it's where the opal miner does it. He does it on a road that is the border of the Hemstock farm. Now, the Hemstocks are they're my favorite family in fiction, and I want to stay at their farm. I would even work there just to stay there. They are 3 females. We have Letty. She's 11. She's great. And she befriends this unnamed 7-year-old narrator. Her mother, Mrs. Hemstock, who works the farm, and then old Mrs. Hemstock, the grandmother. She knows a lot of stuff. All 3 of these people, they are not what they seem. The Hemstocks are much older, much wiser, and they take care of this little boy when something bad happens to him. The Hemstock farm sometimes really doesn't follow the laws of our universe. It's kind of its own separate, quirky thing. But when he dies there, He summons something from a different place, a different time, a different universe that comes into ours. Something that needs to go back. This book, scary, because the narrator, this character, he's 7, so he has the innocence of a 7-year-old. And you know, when you're reading it as a teen or adult, oh, don't do that. Oh, you should be scared here. Oh, don't trust him. And he just doesn't know. Now, those are all the scary vibes, but then you also get comfy, cozy, hygge vibes. Because when the little boy is at the Hemstock farm and he stays at their house, the house is so warm, so loving, so inviting. The food is just nourishing and warming, and it's everything his scared little soul needs. I love this book. I love this book because it hits, scared, comforting, terrifying, nurturing. This is why Neil Gaiman is one of my favorite authors. The next book I'm going to read doesn't give me ever cozy vibes. It just scares me. And that is The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. This is a story told from 2 different points of view and also like 30 years apart. It's first the story of Viv. It's the 80s. She doesn't know what she wants to do with her life. It's all kind of ugh. So she ends up in this town that has this motel, and she starts working there. And as she's working there, she notices there's some really weird stuff that goes on in this motel. It's a haunted house story again. We have a lot of those today. Anyway, some weird stuff's going on, and Viv starts investigating. Why is this happening? When did it start? What's the history of this place? Well, lo and behold, all of her little amateurish investigations, she ends up disappearing completely. I have no idea. Police can't find her. Cold case. Fast forward to today, 35 years later. Her niece, Carly, is on the scene. Carly is like brand new young adult. And she has been living with this aunt being gone her entire life. She never knew her, never met her, but her mom and her grandma, it's devastated them, obviously. And so all of this trauma, Carly is trying to understand and maybe just give everyone in her family, including herself, some answers. So Carly goes and she starts working at the Sundown Motel as the night clerk, much like her aunt did so long ago. And Carly, she also starts seeing that there is something strange going on at this motel. In fact, it happens all the time, and you'd think it would get less scary the more that this scene would be reintroduced, but it doesn't. Because it's one of those old-fashioned motels, every room has an outside entrance. There are 2 stories, and the office is in the middle, and it goes like in a wing. When the thing that haunts the motel is coming toward you, the lights in the 2nd story and the 1st story on top of each door entry go out as it's coming near the main character, and it's terrifying every time it happens, and I loved it. I was here for it. Well, Carly finds out what her aunt is doing, leads to a big discovery, big confrontation, and they literally I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you what happens. You're going to have to read the book because it was really good, and I enjoyed it. Ha! You almost caught me. My last book is Horrorstor by Grady Hendrix. I am a Grady Hendrix fan, and we're going to talk about some of his other books at other times, but today it's Horrorstor. It's the first book I've read in a long time that I was terrified pretty much the entire time I read it. And it's such an interesting premise. It's also a haunted place. I think I know what kind of scary books I like just based on these recommendations. I'm really learning a lot about myself, and this is only my first episode. So anyway, Horrorstor takes place in the Swedish furniture and home furnishing store called Orsk. Not to be confused with the Swedish furniture and home goods store that you might be familiar with. In fact, that was the only little thing that when I would read, it felt like the lawyer said, hey, you need to make sure we're not comparing this haunted store where terrible things happen to people to this other store that takes place in our world. That was kind of funny. It always kind of took me out of the story because I was like, lawyer line. This feels like a lawyer wrote it. Anyway, Amy works at Orsk, and Amy is young, but her life is just going nowhere. She is in this dead-end job at Orsk, and it's huge. It's this huge warehouse. There's a line that gets you into the store. You follow it until you get to the warehouse to get your furniture. And well, Amy is not what we would call a model employee, and her manager, Basil, I'm going to say Basil. That seems very hoity-toity. Basil is all about the Orsk. He is brand, customer satisfaction, employee yada yada, and blah, blah, blah. He's all about it. And he's like, Amy, you want to live and work and get ahead in this job, you got to follow the Orsk way. By the way, there's some weird stuff going on here. What do you know about it? And Amy knows nothing, but she is intrigued. And she takes it upon herself to stay after work one night and figure out what's going on at Orsk. Come to find out in Amy's research, because she's a smart cookie, she does her research, Orsk was built on what used to be a prison/workhouse back in the day, way back in the day. And unfortunately and horrifically, 300 of those inmates died in a terrible fire. They couldn't get out, they were trapped. So all of those souls, those tormented, angry souls, are stuck in Orsk. Now, what I like about this book is, number one, the way that it's formatted, because every chapter starts with a new chapter, but it also starts with a blueprint drawing of a piece of Orsk furniture. So it's like chair, table, hutch, torture device, torture. It just, as you're reading along, it's less Orsk, more workhouse/prison. Who adds to the vibes. It was great. This is also a great book because of its satire. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've read books for a long time. And in fact, I've been a professional librarian for 25 years. So what I'm going to say to you doesn't make me look good, but that's okay. We're all in process here. This is the first book where I went, oh, even though it's a horror book, it's giving me social commentary about today. And then I noticed that they would do that also in sci-fi and fantasy. Yeah, I know. Give me a break, okay? I'm sorry. It seems obvious now, but it wasn't then. It's all about consumerism and the nature of work. Do we work to live, or do we live to work? And that's just not okay. This was a great book. Horror vibes across the board. Loved it. Loved every minute of it. Can't say enough good things about Grady Hendrix or Horrorstor. So there it is, my 5 picks for Halloween books, from not so scary to terrifying to me. If you liked what you saw, make sure you go to your local independent bookstore or your public library to get your copy today. Hit that like and subscribe button if you like what you see, and I'll be back in 2 weeks. So happy reading, everyone.